Once upon a time, when Alma's 3 children were just born, her husband Pedro and Abuela Madrigal were forced to run away from home to find a better life. Many people went with them, but they could not hide from the danger. Pedro died, and all that remained on the ground was a burning candle that he was holding. And suddenly the candle lit up even more. It was a flame that never went out, and all around it mountains rose from the ground, creating shelter and protection all around. This city was called Encanto. The candle created Casitu's house, and this house is alive. When Abuela's children grew up, the candle gave them a magical gift, and then their children. And the little girl Mirabel was also to receive her gift, which would serve for the benefit of their community. Mirabel grew up. There was supposed to be a ceremony today for her nephew Antonio to receive his gift. The little children began to wonder about the gifts of each member of the Madrigal family, and Mirabel was happy to tell them all about them. Peppa controlled the weather, because it depended on her mood. No one talked about Bruno, because he left his family, but his abilities were divination. Mirabel, Juliet's mother, prepared food that was healing and healing at the same time. Abuela was the head of the Madrigal family, because she was the one who found these lands. Cousin Dolores had incredible hearing and could hear literally everything in town. Her middle brother Camilo could change appearances and transform into anyone, and youngest brother Antonio was going to receive a gift today. Mirabel had older sisters Luisa, who is very strong physically, and Isabella, who could make everything bloom and was ideal for the community. Mirabel told about everyone, but the children began to be interested in Mirabel herself, but the problem is that she was the only one in the family who did not have a gift. Everyone began to prepare for the ceremony of Antonio, who fled somewhere. Mirabel returned to her room and noticed that Antonio was under her bed. She supported him and gave him a small soft toy that she made herself. And finally it was evening. All the people of the community had gathered in Casita. The casita shone the lanterns so that everyone could see. Antonio was frightened and asked Mirabel to come with him. Mirabel led him to the door. Antonio touched the door handle and his animal pattern appeared on it. And when he opened the door, he noticed that his room was like a forest. Antonio received his gift. He began to understand the language of animals. Everyone went to take pictures, but they forgot about Mirabel, because she is ordinary. She left the ceremony. She was very offended that she was literally ignored. She was standing in the center of the courtyard and noticed how a brick fell from the roof, and then everything began to collapse. Mirabel noticed how the cracks appeared. She injured her palm. But when she ran to her grandmother and told about the destruction of the house, and when they returned, there was nothing. They did not believe her. Juliet healed Mirabel. At night, Mirabel could not sleep. It was constantly in front of her eyes as if the house was collapsing. The girl couldn't stand it and walked towards the candle, but Abuela was standing there. Mirabel overheard a conversation where Abuela, being in despair, turned to heaven, to Pedro, begging him to give some sign how to save the magic. Abuela knew very well that they were vulnerable. Mirabel became determined and decided to save their family. The next morning, Mirabel went to question Dolores, because she heard everything, but it was Camilo who pretended to be Dolores. The real Dolores then approached Mirabel and said that no one cared about magic except Mirabel, only rats were running in the walls, and Louise's eye twitched at night. Mirabel now wanted to talk to Louise. At breakfast, Mirabel sat down next to Luisa, trying to find out everything, but she didn't succeed, because Abuela began to report that it had already been agreed to marry Isabella to Marian Guzman. Isabella did not look happy. When breakfast was over, Mirabel followed Louise, who was helping everyone with the hard work. Louise admitted that she was scared, that she had a million worries, because many people relied on her. Louise dreamed of how she could forget her worries, but the unknown always scared her. Mirabel hugged Luisa, and then Luisa admitted that when Mirabel saw the cracks yesterday, Luisa lost her power for a few seconds. Louise also shared what the adults were saying about how long ago Uncle Bruno had a vision about this. Mirabel decided to break into Bruno's tower to find the vision. Mirabel got in there. There was sand all around, and Casita couldn't even turn it off. There were hundreds of steps. Mirabel barely climbed up, and when she was there, she saw a chasm. With the help of a rope, she flew over the abyss. Having entered the temple, the door closed behind her. It was dark. Under her feet in the sand, she saw some green debris that glowed. While Mirabelle assembled the fragments into a pile like a puzzle, the flame of the candle flickered and the temple began to crumble. Mirabelle saw herself in one wreckage. Quickly grabbing all the debris, she began to run away, because she did not want to be covered in sand. Mirabelle confronted Abuela and Luisa. Luisa started crying, saying that she was losing her gift after all. Abuela went to the Guzmans to arrange Mariano's engagement to Isabella. Mirabelle came into the room to collect the fragments of the vision, but then Papa appeared, packing Antonio's things. Papa overheard Mirabelle say Bruno's name. Mirabelle decided to take advantage of the situation, but it was forbidden to talk about Bruno. Not a word about Bruno. Felix, Pepa's husband, told Bruno that everything he saw in visions came true. Papa and Felix began to talk about their wedding day, where Bruno warned them that it would rain, and it did. Dolores kept hearing him mumbling and reported that Bruno was not comfortable at all. Camillo literally transformed into Bruno, telling that he was friends with rats. Other residents began to complain about the prophecies that Bruno spoke. Bruno saw Isabella's wonderful life, where her strength grows every day. And for Dolores, the man of her dreams will choose someone else because he listened to his family. Mirabelle saw that the door to Luisa's room was flashing. Her strength was restored, then disappeared again. Mirabelle returned to the room and began to put together the fragments of the vision, because it was a guess. She realized that only Bruno would help her. In the vision was Mirabelle herself standing in front of the crumbling casita. Mirabelle's father came into the room and stared at Mirabelle in shock. He started to tell Mirabelle to keep quiet for now about Mirabelle sneaking into Bruno's tower, but Dolores could hear it, because she could literally hear everything. The entire Madrigal family, along with the Guzman family, were sitting at the table. Mirabelle did not take her eyes off Dolores, so that she did not have time to say anything. But Dolores told Camillo. Camillo gave it to his father, and he in turn gave it to Pepe, and Papa to Juliet. At the same second, cracks appeared on the floor. Mariano wanted to sing an aria for Isabella and asked Mariano's mother to bring the piano. Louise almost started crying again because she did not have the strength to lift the musical instrument. Antonio's animals collected the fragments of Bruno's vision under the table while Luisa tried to drag the piano. A vision of Bruno appeared before Abuela, and at the same second the kitchen began to crack. It began to rain, because Papa began to feel sad. Isabella's engagement is broken. Mirabelle saw the rats steal the shards of the vision and begin dragging them behind the painting where the secret passage was. Mirabelle began to walk further, noticing how the house continued to crack. She saw Bruno in the passage, but he was running away. She ran after him. Mirabelle jumped over the chasm, but almost fell when Bruno saved her. They fell, and it is clear that the height was not small. Bruno was superstitious, throwing salt over his left shoulder so as not to offend. Bruno lived between the walls near the kitchen. Mirabelle thought that it was illogical that Bruno had left them, but in fact he had not. Mirabelle saw a board with a plate painted on it near the wall with the table. And Mirabelle understood that all the time Bruno wanted to be with his family. Bruno admitted that, in his opinion, the visions only harmed the house. Bruno admitted that he really loved this family very much. Bruno said that he saw this vision on the day of Mirabelle's ceremony. The vision was double, but Bruno knew that no one would understand it, so he broke the vision and left the family to protect Mirabelle. Mirabelle began to plead for Bruno to see a new vision, but he refused, because Mirabelle destroyed his cave and divination requires space. At the same second, Mirabelle and Bruno noticed little Antonio, who was standing next to the animals. Antonio said that the rats told him everything. Little by little, a storm began to gather over the house, and the walls began to crack. They were sitting in Antonio's room. Antonio gave Bruno a small soft toy that Mirabelle had given him, saying that it was from Nerves. The weather was getting worse. Bruno and Mirabelle held hands. Bruno began to use his gift while his door glowed. In a vision, they saw the house collapsing, and then the mountains. But the vision was the same, except for the golden butterfly. They followed the butterfly and saw the candle burning even brighter and Mirabel hugging Isabel. Bruno went back for the picture again because he was actually afraid of Abuelo. Mirabel had to reconcile with Isabella. Isabella was angry, and then they started to fight. And Isabella admitted that she agreed to marry Mariano only for the sake of the family. Once in a while a cactus appeared. For the first time in her life, Isabella was able to create something not perfect. Isabella and Mirabel began to create together, and then they embraced and the cracks began to heal. Abuela returned and began to say that Mirabel was only harming the family. And Mirabel understood that no one would ever like Abuela. Only Abuela was destroying their family. The gifts of all the Madrigal members began to disappear. The casita began to crumble, cracks everywhere, including the mountain that protected them, and the main task became to save the magic candle. The casita was completely destroyed, and although Mirabel saved the candle, it went out. Mirabel ran away from her family to the river when Abuela found her. Mirabel sobbed, saying that she always wanted to be needed. Abuela began to tell that it was near this river that Pedro died. Mirabel saw her grandmother's past, how they got the candle, how Abuela became the head of the family. Abuela admitted that she kept forgetting about the miracle. Mirabel saw the golden butterfly and understood. Mirabel began to say that Abuela tried to do her best to make their family grow. In 1 second, Bruno appeared, who wanted to protect Mirabel in front of Bruno. They returned home. All the people of the community came to the destroyed Madrigal house and started helping to build a new house. Dolores and Mariano confessed their love for each other. Mirabel was given a doorknob, Antonio led her to the door and Mirabel put the handle in the door. Suddenly the door lit up and the magic returned to Casita again. Mirabel saved her family, the gifts returned to each person and Bruno lived with them again. They took a joint family photo. Write in the comments if you liked the story about this cartoon. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to watch even more interesting cartoons with me. See you soon.